So I'm here today talking to Radu Murasan of Vivid Helix Games about his game Semispheres, which is a meditative parallel puzzle game that places dual realities at the heart of its challenge. Its unique single-player split-screen mechanic challenges your brain by putting you in control of two characters at the same time. Thanks for coming on the show, Radu. Could you tell me more about your game Semispheres?
First of all, thanks for having me. And about the game, I mean, you kind of read through the short pitch. It is definitely a game that's easier to play than to explain. So I refined it to the point that it actually plays very well, but it's always been a bit hard to explain what makes it compelling. But within the first few minutes of gameplay, people go through that first aha moment, and they kind of get what the game is about.
I was watching the gameplay videos. So from what it looks like, you've got a split screen setup. On one side, you've got an orange circle, and on the other side, you've got a blue circle. And you've got to guide them through these levels, and there are different obstacles that you have to avoid. And on certain levels, you have to have a bit of cooperation. So you've got to use one side to distract things on the other side, or to teleport to get past various traps or whatever. What inspired you to make this game?
So the first version of the game was in August 2014 for a game jam for Ludum Dare 30. The theme was Connected Worlds. So I had played Brothers, Tale of Two Sons before, and that employs the same control scheme where you use two thumbsticks to control the two brothers. And later in the game, there's this scene where you get chased by a big bad guy, and you're on a bridge, and the moment you cross sides and you have the right brother, so the brother that's mapped to the right thumbstick on the left side of the screen and the other way around, that completely breaks your brain. And so instead of bringing them closer together, they diverge even further. So it was a moment of great confusion. If that would happen even once, then you'd have to restart that piece. So a bit of frustration in that part of the game. And I thought, like, how would I fix this? So then the idea was to constrain each of the characters to their own side of the screen. And I'm bringing back this confusion in moderate doses later on in the game, but I'm teaching you how to deal with it by having levels that introduce them switching sides and things like that happening.
Yeah, I can imagine it's very difficult. It's like when people say, "Can you pat your head and rub your tummy at the same time?" It's like one of those things where you really have to concentrate. And so, yeah, if you were to suddenly switch left and right, it would, throw you off a bit. But I think that'd be part of the challenge. So it looks like you've won quite a few awards for this game. Can you tell me more a bit about that? Because it looks like you've gone to various conferences or various showcases around the world and shown the game off, and you seem to be very successful.
Yeah, so I got into a few of the different events. I was in the mega booth at GDC, then PAX West, PAX South, Tokyo Game Show. And I think, as I mentioned before, I jokingly say that almost any any competition that involves people playing the game, I do very well. But if there's like a screening process beforehand, people look at it and I think they kind of assume they know what the game is about. But I think you can't, and going back to the same thing, it's hard to explain why the dual reality side of things is so compelling. So you briefly touched on it that one character can influence the other side. So you have to imagine the two sides of the screen being alternate reality. So like overlapping floors of the same house, if you want,
Mm.
or I always had a Stranger Things reference, but that's kind of spoilery, so I don't want to.
Yeah,
I don't want to
yeah.
bring that up.
No,
Yeah.
I
So
know what you're saying. Yeah, it's sort of that they're inhabiting the same world. I sort of got that from watching the gameplay videos. They're
yes,
inhabiting the same world, but there are different things going on in
yeah,
these worlds, and they have to
yes,
sort of, yeah.
exactly. Like different versions of the same world, and that plays into. This is something I've obviously thought about a lot, and it's still hard for me to explain how you can be confused because think of like people on the two floors of the same house. Uh, I I shouldn't even go into it, but there's varying degrees of messing with your head just because of the fact that it is the left side and the right side of the screen, and they're different, but they're also one space at the same time.
Yeah, they've got the same layout exactly. And so I can imagine when you're showing this off at the various conferences, people sort of come in expect if they've seen it before, they're expecting, oh yeah, I know this is just your standard, whatever. But then when they start playing it, obviously that's where you get your popularity because they go, wow, this is not what I was expecting.
Yeah, it's so I within the latest demo that I've come up with, I think there's like a three interesting moments. So this mechanic of controlling two things at the same time is not as commonly known throughout like the vast majority of gamers because there's not that many games employing it. So that's the first I get it moment where people move two things at the same time. So my game and demo starts in the overworld where you have one screen and you control both characters at the same time, and you go to this orb looking thingy like a dimension dimensional gate or whatever it is, and then you go into the first puzzle level. But when that happens, what's interesting, if you said you mentioned you looked at the gameplay video, that starts as one world and then it splits out into two.
Hmm.
So, and that's the oh wait a minute, what's going on moment, and people like realize what's kind of going on, and the two sides are different, and each of them resides on their own side. And then the third aha moment is when I think the third level of the demo introduces the portal, which is what connects the left side to the right side, and that's always the reaction is almost universal to that one. Like everybody's like, I I can see the smile on their faces. That's the reason I enjoy showcasing the game so much. It's just that that moment when they get what's going on, it's like yeah, this is pretty clever. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
kind of had that watching the demo. Like there was one bit where I was trying to understand how the gameplay works, and I saw that the balls can make these sounds to distract the guards. But then I noticed, hang on, he's distracting the guard in the other reality, and I'm like, it's like it's the same reality. Yeah, and that was it's that Stranger Things without giving anything away, but it was that kind of feeling when yeah, that's really interesting. And your brain is just starting to go, well, wow, what's going to come up next? Like you like this is only an early level. If this is as hard as it is now, holy crap, it's going to get really hard later on. So it looks like it's a game that's got a very good challenge mechanic to it. So that's really cool. So on a technical side of things, what game engine did you use to make this game?
So it's all made in Unity and a lot of custom shaders. So I actually wrote up three different articles, like deep dives on how to make the shaders. You can find them on Gamma Sutra. They were pretty well received. I think first two articles, I linked them to my devlog so I could track the number of hits. And I think I got like 20,000 hits. So it's like moderate. People were
Yeah.
interested in reading. So I did like a step by step with animated GIFs of saying like this is what happens if you change this, and then we go to the next step. So that was really interesting, like a deep dive, and it was really educational for me to actually went through it because I ended up understanding the topic better.
Yeah, there's nothing better than when you've got to explain something to someone else to
Yes,
actually work out exactly what's
absolutely.
going on. So that's really cool, though. You've taken the time to sort of explain it to other game developers, and I can understand the popularity of it. I mean, Unity is a very popular game engine at the moment. Was there any particular reason, I mean, apart from its popularity, that you chose Unity over, say, some other engine?
So for me, my background is primarily, or used to be primarily Java and then C Sharp. So it was a
Right.
natural thing to do. I've done C++ in the past, and I don't have anything against it personally. It's just I've gotten so used to working in this environment that it was just like a more natural choice for me.
Yeah.
And also, I've kind of sworn not to ever work on a team doing C++ again.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to say,
so I wouldn't mind
yeah.
doing it alone, but it's just I think pointers and memory management in general, it seems to be a topic that a lot of people either like just latch onto it or they don't,
Hmm.
and that can create some problems.
Yeah, so yeah, it probably is a lot easier as well. Like going from something that you're familiar programming in and using that to make a game as opposed to sort of fighting against yourself and learning something new while you're also learning to make games. I mean, if what kind of advice could you give an aspiring game developer from that front? I mean, is there any particular engine or language or mechanism for learning? Like, how did you go about your? I mean, you already had programming experience, but how did you go about your journey of saying, well, okay, I know how to program, let's make a game.
I think the engine choice is not as important. So there's I think the big ones like Unreal and Unity and GameMaker. are all safe choices. Even some of the smaller ones like Construct. People have released games in all of those. They all come with their own set of problems and baggage, which will make it harder to release on, say, mobile or on consoles. But in the end, what's gonna determine whether you release a game is if you're determined to actually finish it. So I wouldn't stress myself too much. I see this question of like, what engine should I be using? I don't think that's as important. Just use something that plays to your strengths. So if you don't have a programming background, maybe go with something that allows you to not get so involved in programming. So I haven't used Unreal, so I'm not sure about their blueprint system, but I know Game Maker is definitely a lot more friendly for newcomers,
Hmm.
even Construct, or I had a friend who was using Game Salad. So there's a lot of options out there. Uh, I guess the other advice would be to not listen to any single independent developer, which kind of invalidates my own advice right now, but just like ask several people and make your own opinion because everybody's going to be biased. I prefer Unity because that's what works for me, but
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that's going to be good for everybody. I yeah, I think as long as it's popular, that's probably would be my number one criterion for picking an engine.
Yeah.
Because if it's popular, when you run into problems, you can fix them without having to wait 2 days on somebody to respond on a forum. Like on
Yeah.
Unity, I think 99% of the time, if I have a problem, somebody else has run into it before, and I can see the fix, or I can learn that it's haven't been hasn't been fixed in 5 years or something. So.
Yeah, and it seems like as well, like there's a lot of solo game developers. So you built this whole game yourself, right? You weren't part of a team.
Pretty much, yeah. I did work with Sid Barnhoen, who's a very talented audio guy from the Netherlands,
Mm-hmm.
and I had somebody draw the sketches. Like the story in my game is presented via these comic book strips, so
Mm-hmm.
somebody else drew that, and I had somebody briefly helping me with the just coming up with the story because I was kind of stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but
I
for the
mean,
most part, I
that's
think
you're a
90
solo. That's
90
I mean,
something percent of the effort is mine. Yes.
yeah, no, that's really cool, and I think that's something as well that a lot of game developers like to hear because it's like, well, a lot of them are worried that they need to, learn this technology or that technology and be a master of all trades. When really you can focus on the actual just programming the game, and you can do the art yourself, or you can pay someone else to get that for you, or like with the audio, you can pay someone else. But by and large, you can succeed by yourself and sort of, get it done. So the game is currently on Steam. Are you planning to release it on other platforms, or is it already out on other platforms?
Actually, it is out on PS4 as well,
Oh
and
wow,
it's
excellent!
gonna come on Xbox One soon-ish, maybe a couple of months, 2, 3 months.
Wow, that's really
Yeah,
cool.
it is. That was quite a journey. It's not something I would necessarily recommend uh, to anybody. I've done some games before, like it's kind of smaller titles and
Hmm.
mobile titles, but I would definitely not recommend trying to go console with your first game.
Right, it's
It
probably easier to go mobile or PC first.
Yeah, I'd say mobile or PC. Mobile is especially if you're using something like Unity, it's a good way to just learn how to do things and make sure that you finish. It's just getting into that habit of finishing and delivering something that's the hardest thing. And
Hmm.
I think that's why most of the games never get finished because people want to do the MMORPG that's inspired from whatever, pick out another genre that takes years to make,
Yeah, and
and they
they
never get past the concept phase.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, this is you've obviously been doing game development as a hobby for a while, and then you turned it into something commercial. Is it something that you can now? I mean, are you comfortable making a living off it, or do you still have to have your day job?
It's a weirder story. It actually starts in Australia. My
Ah,
game dev
cool.
story. Yeah, I dabbled with game development a long time ago, and I dropped it for a long time. And back in 2010, when I was in Australia for about half a year, I started working on games again on the side. So I made a puzzle game, which did okay, nothing groundbreaking. Then after I moved back to Canada, I started working on kids games, and I was doing that on the side. It's amazing how having kids can focus you because you don't do anything else. So
Mm-hmm.
like having no time means actually having more time than when you do have time, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
any sense.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just so I did that for a while, and back in 2013 in January, I quit my job and I went full indie, and I've been independent since. I've had a few contracts along the way, but yeah, so those games did well enough, and then later on I sold them off to somebody else to kind of fund this game. Now, depending on how this game is going to do, it depends whether I need to take on a bit more contract work or I can keep on working on the straight game on the next game straight away. So that's kind of my story. I've been like I haven't been going to an office 5 days a week for a long time now.
That's brilliant.
Even when I had the contracts, I was fortunate enough that I specialize in Android. And I think that that's a really interesting. I'll get back to this, but it allowed me to work from home a bit as well because
Hmm.
it's typically just me on the team.
Yeah.
And me and one of my other friends from here in Calgary, where I live right now, I think we've found this like interesting way of doing independent game development that even if you're not fully sustainable from income from games, you can do something else outside of games which potentially pays better and have like this blended lifestyle where you do. So my friend is a web dev, I'm a programmer, so you can do contracting on the side
Hmm.
in those spaces and then do games in the rest of the time, whatever that means.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's
Yep.
interesting. It is harder because you have to maintain two different skill sets, but at the same time, it may give you more freedom. Whereas contracting in games, uh, it'd be hard to make a living, especially depending on your requirements. Like I have a family and kids, so I feel
Hmm.
guilty if I didn't provide.
Hmm.
So you have to find whatever balance right for you. I just want people to consider that there may be a way to do work outside of games as well as in games and have that be a way of being a game developer.
Yeah, because there are other kinds of development which pay probably a lot better than games. Because games, I mean,
Most
while
definitely, yes.
they're the most glamorous kind of programming, but by and large, at least from what I've experienced as well, like the stuff that you can get for contract work working for a games company is a lot less than say, yeah, working for a web development company or an advertising agency making mobile apps or something like that.
Most definitely. And you can also take advantage of your location. So, in the city that we live in, there's not much of a game development scene. So, that means that even if I were to get a game development contract, I'd be competing with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not very price competitive in Canada compared to almost like to many other places in the world.
Hmm.
But if you're doing, let's say, mobile development or like software development in general or web development, then you can be local and that can be your asset. You're local. You can go into the office a few days a week. You can have those meetings and you can basically charge a local rate rather
Hmm.
than competing with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So that's something also to consider for places that don't have a triple A scene and the trickle down that you get from that with contracts.
And that's some really good advice out there for aspiring game developers. So I won't take any more of your time, Radu. Thank you very much for sharing your insights and your knowledge, and I wish you all the best with Semispheres. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much for having me. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.